welcome back to Spirit Lounge. Hope you guys are doing well. Today we're going to embark upon the second video of the Khuddaka Nikaya, which is the last of the 5 sections. And it's called Udana, which is just one name of the first section. There are actually more sections than the Udana, but we're going to start off with that one and continue through. So I hope you enjoy it. This was one of the more meaningful out of the 5 sections, actually, I think you'll find. So hopefully you enjoy it too. So let's get straight into it. Okay, so this is going to be covering the Khuddaka Nikaya, the 5th of the set, and we're going into Udana as the precursor passages. The Tipitaka, as you know, contains the Dhamma teachings fit into collections and Nikayas. This is the 5th of the 5 Nikayas. It's full of Buddhist teachings, and it's referred to the baskets. Tipitaka means basket of knowledge, basket of teachings, and it comprises of what's called the section of the Pali Buddhist Canon. Suttas are building blocks or passages or vagas. It's religious discourses and homilies, and the Khuddaka Nikaya is regarded as one of the major works of the Tipitaka. It's one of the more deeper content of Buddhist teachings and readings, which is called patha, and precepts of Buddhism taught by Buddha to early monks, and also important collections of major tenets of Buddhism as well. So you'll find this as we walk through it. Okay, the Udana. The Udana, which means joyful sayings, contains 80 suttas or passages. It deals with the most important events in life of the Buddha, the most important elements of the Buddha's doctrine or dhamma. On the 12 nidanas, which are dependent origination and dependent arising, and in ascending order, it's ignorance begets karma. So that if you follow this through, it's talking to you about how you evolve in gnosis, in other words. So the nidanas are dependent origin and a dependent arising. This means where you start from and where you are seeking to go. In ascending order, ignorance begets karma. Of course, negative actions, word, thoughts and intentions brings karma formations. Karma formations begets consciousness. Bad karma formations means ignorance, means awareness of consciousness is not there. Going into consciousness begets mind and body, i.e. you go into the name and form, identification of it. Mind and body beget the 6 senses, which means you go into mind and body, identification, then into the confinements of the senses, sight, smell, taste, touch, sound, and intellectual egotism or egoism. The 6 senses beget contact, which means that you have the collision of the senses with objects, physical things. You start getting desires, attachments to those desires from that which you experience through the senses, to the body, to the mind, and through ignorance and the consciousness of the body and the mind. Then you start getting feelings, which is attachments. You register the contact. You start getting cravings for more contact. And then you have clinging to these, which is called the attachments, which beget becoming, which is new karma and rebirth. Cycle of suffering, as it's called, begets birth, which is realization of the karma that you still hold on, begets decay and death. This is talking about the cycle of constant reincarnation. The cessation of ignorance leads to the cessation of karma formations, leads to the cessation of consciousness to the mind and the body, leading to the cessation of the 6 senses that confine us, and then through that the awareness, or rather the attachment to contact and feelings and cravings as a result from them, and the clinging to that which is attachment, and the cessation of being in matter being, birth, incarnation, and therefore the resolution of decay and death, and the cessation of suffering through repeated decay and death and reincarnation, on the understanding of the 12 nidanas, leading to the elimination of all evil. On the qualities of a true Brahmin, remember the Brahmin that those that which have reached the state of enlightenment or reaching enlightenment, known gnosis within spiritual matters. They are free from evil, discontent and impurity. They are in impurity. They are controlled. They have perfect knowledge of Buddha's teachings and have attained the goal of a holy life. Anyone can reach a Brahmin state. It's not given by birth. which is also something that Buddha rejected. Okay, the Mukhalinda Vaga. The only alternative to convert conversation on the Buddha's teaching is silence. On the superiority of holy pleasures over worldly pleasures. On how those who seek pleasure by harming others finding suffering in the next life. On a layperson telling the Buddha that he would have come sooner but could not due to worldly obligations. On what brings happiness, lack of possessions, understanding of the Buddha's teachings. Now why has he put that sentence on the layperson telling the Buddha that he would have come sooner but could not due to worldly obligations? Well, back then when this was written, it was determined that worldly obligations should be disregarded. Leave family, leave children after they've reached a certain age, and leave your wife and just go off into the forest and do this and detach from all other things. Well, this is not necessarily the way in modern life. Okay, we live in a modern world. We have responsibilities and things that we have to those loved ones that we're responsible for. Coming sooner, what does that mean? Well, started the spiritual passage for this individual. The worldly life does not negate us starting the spiritual passage. In fact, the worldly life requires us to embark upon it as soon as possible, because then we truly understand the nature of the physical passage, and we'll navigate it with contentment, peace, and grace because of the Father light that shines through it, that we allow to shine through it. So, worldly obligations, matters, responsibilities in this life are still always going to be there, but do not let them prevent you from starting the spiritual passage that you seek. Start it in earnest and follow it through as you experience this material life. On the death of a layperson's beloved son, on how people love forms and how all forms are subject to decay and death, on the happiness of those who give up love of forms, on love of forms as a key source of misery, on how the monk Badiya sat in the jungle, he came from a powerful family, and he was protected by armed men. Always fearful he was, but in the forest he was protected by Buddha's dhamma or teachings, and lived without fear. On how internal peace and detachment lead to fearlessness, happiness, and freedom from suffering. Absolutely. The more you allow the grace of the Father to enter, the fear drops from material life. Nothing will make you fearful. No programming from this world will make you fearful. No fear propaganda will make you fearful. You'll see through it. You'll see wisdom. You'll attain wisdom, happiness, and freedom from that which creates suffering in the world of matter. The Nanda Vaga, on refraining from karma forming actions, on atoning for past karma, on the meditative powers of the chief disciple Sariputta, on how the destruction of ignorance supports unshakable meditative skill, on the meditative powers of the disciple Maha Moggallana. Now, Maha Moggallana is quoted many times in the Tipitaka that I'm reading. So he obviously was a very accomplished Buddhist practitioner, disciple, and on his own meditative and spiritual capabilities. On how the mindfulness and control over the six senses and organs and the right concentration supports the attainment of enlightenment. Very true, this is repeated throughout everything we've gone through. The wrong way to seek alms is seeking alms and indulging in sense desire. On the heavenly eye, which is to see anything anywhere, which is the third eye, between the two eyes in the temple, of the Buddha, seeing the great suffering of the world caused by ill will, ignorance and greed. On identity view as a disease, this is identity to yourself, to the self, to the body, the ego of the mind, the human. On the impermanence of everything in the world. Meghiya Vaga, on the spiritual journey of a monk Meghiya. On the 5 requirements for a monk to progress in the holy life: spiritual companionship, which we've discussed. Virtue, this is not virtue signaling through self-righteous egoism. This is holding religious virtue or spiritual virtue, doing the right thing through the sense of grace. Conversation on the Buddha's teachings, discourse, study, investigation into all teachings, right effort, and wisdom, which is a culmination of all of these things, and the mind, and experiences in life. On the four meditative ecstasies, on how a poorly controlled mind is of more harmful to a person than the actions of an enemy. On the teachings of the Buddha, to not seek error in others, to harm none, to follow the higher code of ethics, to know the right amount of food to eat, no gluttonous, to live in an isolated place or silence and contentment and peace, to be dedicated to developing right concentration, meditation and focus, on how monks who do not suffer while living and do not suffer with thoughts of death and do not crave rebirth, in who are at peace, these monks find enlightenment. Sonatheravāga, on identity view and the love of self, on recognizing that all living things have a love of self, thus harming any living being should be out of the question. This is all in balance because this is talking about food, this is talking about animals, talking about fish, this is talking about birds. Remember, the grass is a living being as well. A seed is a living being. The lentil is a living being. It has aura, it has essence. It lives, it knows itself, it is there, it has the grace of being, even if it's rudimentary. So we have to be balanced in how we take these extreme views. To harm nothing means to really eat nothing. Not even walk on grass, because you are damaging grass. So, be wary of virtuous ways of thinking and ideological thought, and not to judge. Do things in balance, but always let grace lead you in your actions, words and thoughts and intentions. Do this, and then you'll be always on the right path. Upasada Sutta, the parable of the great ocean. Now, this is a great parable, I like this one. Explaining the ocean has 8 things about the Buddha's teachings which pleases monks. Meaning, the ocean has a gradual slope, and the Buddha's doctrine is acquired by gradual learning and gradual achievement. The ocean is eternal, and the Buddha's doctrine is eternal. The ocean does not accept those without virtue. All great rivers flow into the ocean and lose their names. This is losing your attachment, your identity, yourself. Remember, names, body and form. And those who enter the Buddha's community become equal regardless of the situation they came from. There is no such thing as enlightenment through birth. Despite river flow and rain, the ocean neither increases nor decreases. And likewise, one who attains enlightenment does not display their either increase or decrease. Salt is the only taste of the Buddha's teachings. The ocean has many treasures. Likewise, the Buddha's teachings contain many treasures, such as the Fourfold Way and other definitions. The ocean contains great creatures, and the Buddha's community contains great and noble persons. Devadatta would split from the Buddha's community to form his own community of monks. Buddha's response in doing so is, doing good through good means is easy. Doing good through bad means is not easy. Doing bad by bad means is easy. Doing bad by the doctrine of the Buddha is difficult. Foolish speak foolish words while pretending to be wise. So he's basically saying that, you're splitting in your community. Are you the Buddha yourself? Okay, the Jakandavaga. On knowing someone only after living with them for a great length of time. On the spies of King Papasanadi of Kosala. On the unsuitability of some undertakings. On the unsuitability of earning a livelihood by trading in the Buddha's teachings. On the Buddha's contemplation, to reach enlightenment, he had to destroy unpleasant things and cultivate many pleasant things. On false doctrines, which is all claimed by their followers to be the one true doctrine. The world is eternal, the world is not eternal. The world is boundless, the world is not boundless. The body and the soul are the same, the body and the soul are different. People abide after death, people do not abide after death. People do or do not abide after death. There's a lot of this in the Buddhist Pali. Duality, in other words. This one is not true, but the other is also not true, kind of thing. This kind of talks to the permanence of all things, the gnosis that really, in actual fact, all things are true and not true in the nothingness of grace, because nothing has true reality. On confusing the means of attaining enlightenment with the actual goal of attaining enlightenment, on how people rush through life without ever knowing what is important in life, thus creating rebirth and suffering. This is what I was mentioning before. When you lose yourself in the material realm, in humanity, in humanness, and in this world and the nature of the system, the human system, you will lose yourself and you will just rush through life, not ever knowing the important reason for your purpose here, and therefore incurring rebirth and suffering through the material realm and all those experiences that you will traverse through within it. Okay, Kulavaga. On the wickedness of people of Savathiya, on how the fetters of sense desire are the same as being fettered to evil, on how the monk Badiya was a dwarf, ugly and often ignored, but being one of the most accomplished monks, having achieved the goal of the holy life, on the Brahmin who filled their water well to the top of the glass in order to prevent the Buddha and his touring monks from drinking. When the Buddha requested his disciple Ananda to fetch water, 3 times Ananda told the Buddha that the well has been sabotaged. Then Ananda went to the well and discovered it full to the top with pure drinking water. On the fire at the palace that claimed the lives of 500 women, including the queen, all were women in the Buddha's dispensation. And the Buddha, using his psychic power to determine the future fate of those women, all of whom went on to increase, some of whom who became once returners and non-returners, on the world being enslaved by ignorance. Psychic powers meaning psychical powers, mediumship powers. Remember, when one opens perception, it can see through the veil of humanity of the material realm into vaster states of perception. That's all this is. Okay, the patha ligama vaga, pardon me. On the Buddha's talk of Nibbana, Nibbana being the end of all suffering, being a sphere beyond the 4 elements. For me, Nibbana is the end or the release from rebirth into materialism, not the end of rebirth into other forms of energy form. Beyond the 4 elements, earth, water, fire and air, this is matter, as I mentioned, materialism. Beyond infinite space, infinite cognition into infinite cognition. Nothingness, neither consciousness nor lack of consciousness. Beyond the world, moon and sun, beyond all foundations. On the Buddha's talk on Nibbana, which is the goal of the holy life, being an escape from worldly desires, a place without birth, without past, present or future, this is the realm of grace. On 2 paths, one path is recommended by monk Nagasamalo, but the Buddha does not take the recommended path. Nagasamalo parts company with Buddha and his monks and follows the path he recommended, only to be beaten by thugs along the path on abstaining from evil doings. That's unfortunate. Tipitaka contains 112 of Buddha's suttas, many dealing directly with the theme of karma, identifying what kinds of behaviour result in non-virtue and lower rebirth into hell, and what kinds of behaviour result in virtue and better rebirth or rebirth into heaven. Well, I would suggest anything that is not guided, is guided by ignorance, the entrapment of the material realm and all its desires and attachments. And that which that is not within the realm and guided by the Divine Father, that is arising from your soul, your heart, your mind, moving into spiritual thought and vibration. These things will create karma. And karma is just really cause and effect, which is unresolved energy within the realm of the material space which your soul draws you back into, in other words. Through choice, a soul choice. Okay, Khuddaka Nikaya. On vices that, if at least one is destroyed, lead to one becoming a non-returner, destined for enlightenment. On greed, on ill will, on ignorance, on anger, on hypocrisy, on judgmentalness, on the need to cultivate an understanding of the six senses in order to realize freedom from suffering. Understanding of judgmentalness, greed, ill will, ignorance, anger and hypocrisy, on the need to destroy ignorance, an effective and efficient focus. Spiritual companionship will do also this. On how those who possess a pure mind are rewarded with better rebirth or rebirth in heaven. On how a single person slipping from life to life would, during a world cycle, leave enough bones to form a pile equal to the Vepula rock, which is counted among the peaks of the Himalayas. So this is leaving life-to-life reincarnations, leaving enough bones from each of them to create a mountain. The Dukkha Nikaya, and how those who take good action and think good thoughts are rewarded with better rebirth or rebirth in heaven. On how those who take evil action and think evil thoughts are rewarded with rebirth in hell. On how those who do good mentally, verbally and physically are rewarded with better rebirth or rebirth in heaven. On the need to cultivate urgency in achieving the goals of the holy life and diligence in pursuing these holy goals. On the Buddha's two teaching points. First is to recognize evil for evil and to seek detachment and liberation from evil. On how ignorance leads to shamelessness and a belief that one may do evil with impurity, and how wisdom leads to humility, which is from an understanding of shame and belief that there are consequences to evil action. Well, I think that speaks for itself. Okay, the Digha Nikaya. On ill will, ignorance and greed being the roots of all evil. On three hungers, sense, existence and ignorance. On developing these qualities that mark a monk as being beyond the reach of Mara, who is the evil tempter. No longer needing to develop virtue, practice meditation or cultivate the power of judgment. On three eyes, the body eye, the heavenly eye, the ability to see anything anywhere is the heavenly eye, the psychical eye, and the eye of perspicacity, which is having a ready insight into things, i.e. seeing into things, intuitive insight. On three wisdoms, mental, verbal and physical. On three qualities that mark a monk as being in the grip of Mara, the evil tempter. That's ill will, ignorance and greed. On three liberations, the abandonment is liberation from the sense desire, formlessness is liberation from form, and enlightenment is liberation from impermanence. Let's repeat that. Abandonment is liberation from sense desire, formlessness is liberation from form, and enlightenment is liberation from impermanence. Which is very good. On how form is less peaceful than formlessness, yes, which is less peaceful than enlightenment, which is the trajectory you're moving towards, so moving away from the attachment of form into the peace from formlessness, or the attachment into non-form, which moves into the greater peace of enlightenment, or nibbana. On how a corrupt person cannot see the Buddha, even if in close proximity, but a pure seed person can see the Buddha, even if they are very distant. What does this mean? It's very, very similar to what was read in the Nagamadi. As you pass through the spheres towards heaven, or to grace, you pass through the lower realms, and the devil or the demon could not see you. I paraphrase. This is the same as the same thing. That those who are in spiritual practice can see that which is spiritual, can see that which is of enlightened and of gnosis. Those who are ignorant will never see grace, never understand the nature of nibbana or gnosis, or that which is before them on that passage, because they will be spiritually and energetically and perceptually blind to it. even if they are very distant. On the three qualities of a true Brahmin: the ability to recall past lives, the heavenly eye, the ability to see anything anywhere, and having come to the end of karma formation and attained enlightenment. The Khuddaka Nikaya, on four qualities of holy monks: virtue, meditational skill, judgment, and detachment, or non-judgment, I would say. Sutta Pitaka. The Sutta Pitaka is one of the oldest collections of the Buddha's teachings, one of the most understandable and one of the easiest to practice in everyday life. Most basics of the Buddhist teachings. I think we've gone through a lot of that already. Okay, and the Udana, on how progress in holy life requires one to shed evil as a snake sheds its skin. The Khuddaka, on the surpassed value of the three jewels: the Buddha, the Buddha's teachings, and the Buddha's community. On the emptiness and uselessness of rituals in purifying a person. I do not ever espouse ritualistic behaviour, ceremony. All of this is only symbolic. You don't need to do it. If it holds value for you, go ahead. But I don't espouse it. It doesn't hold purpose if you're doing it because you think you're moving through gnosis through these virtuous acts of symbol or symbolic ritual and ceremony. It's not necessarily the case. It just really massages and satisfies a spiritual ego, a spiritual virtuousness, that you're doing something and you feel better than someone who isn't in your spiritual passage. On evil-mindedness and evil actions as the source of a person's impurity, remember your church is within yourself. The practice is in yourself. The ceremony is in yourself. The bridal chamber is in yourself. Grace is in yourself. On the qualities that conduce to the attainment of enlightenment: right virtue, respecting of elders, seeking the company of good teachers, and asking questions, remembering what is said, taking pleasure in Buddha's teachings, abstaining from foolish talk, understanding the Buddha's teachings. On the difference between the path of the monk and the path of the householder, the two different things. Remember, the householder was something that you would be up until the path of being able to leave the family, go into forest life, into spiritual detachment, and into isolation. This was always the way that things were we practiced back then. But we have to balance these things out into what is really the modern life that we live today. The Mahavaga, on how Mara, the king of death and the demon of desire, tries to trick the Buddha into abandoning the holy life and fails. On four elements of right speech: well-articulated speech, dharma speech, which is teaching, which is pleasing speech, and true speech. On impermanence, on how no being escapes death, but how any being may escape suffering and sorrow through the removal of reincarnation. Everyone escapes death. I say this to many people who espouse the virtue of the mind, ego, the worship of technology, their own intellect, their intellectualism, their virtue signaling their self-righteous selves, the self they adorn in the mirror. I always say, if this is what you think is true, then everyone dies one day. And there is only one reality, there is only one truth, there is only one Father. This will be shown to all. And the ego will drop away, and folly and regret. Well, there's not really regret, but the soul will understand what it has failed to fulfill itself in the life lived, and draw itself back into incarnational life to bring itself into the light of the Father, which I believe all life incarnation is really driven by. We do it ourselves, to ourselves. Okay, thank you so much for listening to this. Second coming is you, and become what it is you seek, all that we are, the divine grace through the torus of self, the soul, the heart, the mind and the body, traversing through the torus up to the Father, the light at the top. And it's transformative. It is not virtue signaling. It is not of various activities that you do just for ritualistic or ceremonial means. These will not have purpose or value. It must be transformative. Change yourself, but you're not here to be perfect allow yourself those drops into humanness at times, but we all try to limit them as much as possible, which is the purpose of all things. Okay, I want to say thank you for listening to this. I do appreciate it. Your time is precious. We have 2 more videos in this final Nikaya, and thank you for joining this passage with me, and God bless you all until next time. Thank you.